as extending their influence into the rest of the Middle East and what Saudi Arabia perceives as Iranian aggression.
Now, this strike disrupted half of Saudi Arabia's oil production, amounting to about 5% of global daily output. How is it that this attack could be so significant, has such a significant impact, when these sorts of drone attacks have happened before? This is not the first time.
Yeah, I mean, part of the question here is oil installations themselves. There's a lot of theory that suggests that oil can lead to conflict, in part because the installations, the refineries, and the pipelines themselves are quite vulnerable to this type of attack. Now, it's not clear yet if the Houthis had the level of technological capability to reach this eastern province of Saudi Arabia. That's part of the reason behind, I think, the US's assessment that this is more likely to have been a strike conducted by Iran.
So because of the level of sophistication, to your mind, there is a very clear chain of responsibility that goes back to the Iranian leadership here?
Well, it either means two things. It either means that the Iranians conducted the attack, or it means that they provided the Houthis with the weaponry to conduct the attack. So yes, in that manner of speaking.
Tell me about these facilities themselves. How significant is this to Saudi Arabia? Because we're yet to find out exactly how long it would take to repair, what the scale of the damage is.
Yeah, I know the Saudis government is still trying to provide clarity on how long it's going to take to bring production back online. But for context, the Abqaiq oil processing facility, it is the largest in the world. It processes the vast majority of Saudi Arabian crude. That's one of the reasons why Saudi production, over 50% of their production, will be impacted and has been impacted as a result of these attacks.
Saudi Arabia has invested a lot of money in its air defences. How is it that this particular attack wasn't picked up, and what does that say about the quality of those air defences?
Look, for air defences, you'd have to focus more on with a security analyst, and I'll leave that to the Saudi Defence Agency and the US Defence Agency, which is engaged in training Saudi soldiers and engagement on sort of technological air defences, those kinds of things. But I will say that they will be looking very closely at why they weren't able to pick this up, and if there's anything they can do to prevent further disruption to what is the mainstay of their economy.
We've seen reaction from Iran, a very angry one, against suggestions from the US that it is responsible. What's your reading of that response?
At the moment, the Iranians have rejected many of the claims that they've been involved in attacks over the last year or so. So I don't put my trust in because they've rejected it means they're not involved. However, I would caution that the Yemeni Houthis, if this was them and not indeed the Iranians, they shouldn't be viewed directly as a as an Iranian proxy. The relationship between the Iranian regime and the Houthi rebel militia is a little more complex than that. So if you're talking about that, if it was a Houthi-conducted attack, then there's going to need to be further analysis before we can draw clear conclusions.
Perhaps unsurprisingly, Donald Trump has tweeted that the US has reason to believe it knows who was responsible for the attack, and he's done so without particularly identifying Iran just yet. But tell me this, how much appetite is there in that region right now for a military conflict of some sort erupting from this particular dispute?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that direct military confrontation helps nobody in the region. There's nobody in particular who will benefit from that. However, that being said, there have been a new generation, if you like, of more hawkish leaders that have come to power in the Gulf region, in Saudi Arabia. The conservative Netanyahu government is in power in Israel. The Emirati government has become more sort of interventionist in terms of regional affairs. And again, they view this as responding to Iranian increasing meddling in regional affairs, and they see it from their perspective. I'm not saying I agree with them, but they see it in Bahrain, they see it in Yemen, they see it in Iraq and Syria. So for them, the extension of Iranian authority further and further into the Middle East is a key priority. And this is, of course, the leadership in Saudi Arabia has already, under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, become embroiled in the Yemeni civil war. So there is a potential for conflict here that we should be very concerned about.
Kellyanne Conway, the president's advisor, has told Fox News Sunday in the US that the president has many options on the table, and it appears to leave open this prospect of direct negotiations between the US and Iran over this issue and the nuclear issue as well. To what degree would other countries in the region take part in those talks? Would they have the appetite to seek another way forward?
Yeah. So one of the things worth mentioning is that the JCPOA negotiations, which was the Iran nuclear deal, or the P5+1 Iran nuclear deal, was very much, it was disliked by the GCC countries, Saudi Arabia and the UAE in particular, because they viewed this as, you know, trying to address a bully in the region. They viewed this
trying to placate unnecessarily.
Yeah, to placate a region that to placate a government that didn't need placation; it needed aggressive action. So I think further negotiations, it would be useful if we could get some of the GCC states on board, but I don't personally have particularly high hopes for it.
All right. Can I ask you this question? A lot of people around the world are now concerned about the price of oil because of this attack. What is the impact going to be around the world and here in Australia?
So Australia, we don't rely directly on Saudi Arabian oil exports. Most of our oil actually comes through Southeast Asia, through Malaysia, a lot of it. So in terms of the impact on Australian citizens, on other countries around the world, it's going to be more indirect. So this is something that's going to cause the oil price to increase. When markets opened this morning, it very rapidly increased by almost 20%, the Brent crude price, that is. So this is something where we might be looking at in the short to potentially medium-term higher oil prices. But to be honest, if you can predict oil prices in the Middle East, you can make a great deal of money. So I won't try and predict.
Indeed. Dr. Jessie Moritz, it's good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.